Thank you so much, Yogi Roth, for being with me today on the WaveCapital's guest speaker series on relationship building in a team environment. You're my 105th guest, fellow podcaster. How are you today, Yogi?
I'm doing well, man. Excited to be here. Excited to learn like the origin of this thing. I'm kind of curious about that. And congratulations on all your success as well.
Yeah, congratulations to you as well. And you're going to be a NBC Sports broadcaster this fall, and you've broadcasted before with the Pac-12, and you started your collegiate career at Pitt with Larry Fitzgerald. He was your roommate. I met Larry 20 years ago. I had Nancy Lieberman on my podcast. She's good friends with Larry, and you were just sharing with me of how much you know Coach Mark Gottfried, and he was on my podcast too. All great people, and so excited to interview you today. Yogi, when you think of relationship building in a team environment, what has it meant to you and what has it meant for your professional career?
I'm happy to answer that, but I do want to know like what made you start a podcast that had such a unique focus around such a broad topic?
I appreciate you asking me that. And I've always loved the idea of relationship building. I always say that relationship building is the essence of humanity. And it goes back to my experience when I met Michael Jordan and Larry Fitzgerald back when I was 17 years old. My father was invited to the 2005 Hoopty Celebrity Golf Classic in Greensboro, North Carolina at the Grand Over Resort. And over a 3-4 day period, my father got to golf with his associates at the time with Super Bowl 20 MVP Richard Dent of the Chicago Bears, and Michael Jordan got paired with Delta Airlines, and there was all these other professionals from Pepsi Cola and other businessmen and women who, depending on how much you sponsored in terms of dollar amount, how much you sponsored the event, you would be paired with an athlete. And my father and his associates were paired with Richard. And, I was enrolled in this basketball camp as well that was head up by Fred Whitfield, who Michael Jordan and Fred go back many years as longtime friends. And Michael and Fred ran the Charlotte Hornets for many years. And I had Fred on my podcast too. But it was those early days when I was 17 years old, and I'd write on 3x5 note cards all the people I met, their names, their addresses, the businesses they worked for, their phone numbers. And I said to my father, who he was in financial services, a lawyer by profession. So he was somebody who looked at it as a opportunity to network with people and relationship build with people himself. But he wanted to surprise me for my 17th birthday, knowing that I was such a big Michael Jordan fan, one of the biggest out there. I always say the biggest, but that wouldn't be fair because there's so many Michael Jordan fans out there, and I'm not the only big Michael Jordan fan. But he wanted to surprise me for my birthday and say, "Hey, we're going to have the opportunity to meet all these athletes, including your basketball idol." So I was floored by the opportunity. And, over my right shoulder, you see that picture of me and Mike. And that was when I was 17 years old. And I look at that picture from time to time and say, wow, what a journey it's been, how much I've grown and developed from that standpoint as a professional, an adult who now I have my own family, and my wife and we have our 3-year-old son, and we have our daughter on the way in a few weeks. So I appreciate the question, and you being a family man and you having a family, and you're talking about like dropping off your child at preschool and going through similar experiences being a podcaster, but you pursued your dream in football. So would love to hear your story.
Yeah, well, congratulations, man. I think it's important to know like the origin of these shows, like 105 episodes deep. And I've listened to some of your episodes as well, and they're fun, especially the people that I had, either a connection with, a relationship with to the point of this entire show. I was like, I wonder if you keep going back to the essence of it. And listening to your shows, it seems like you do, which is really cool. So I say all that to just congratulate you and excited to be on. We've never met, but this will be a fun hour or whatever we have here to kind of jam on the power of relationships. Around your question of relationships, I love that word on a lot of levels. I think when you grow up with a bunch of athletes, you can sometimes be told like, go make connections. I talk to recruits all the time. I just did an event for NCSA, which is a huge recruiting arm of IMG, which is in Florida, the same state that you reside as well. And I try to remind all these young families that are navigating this, that it's not connections, right? It's not a LinkedIn ding. It's a relationship. And I go back to when I was in college. You referenced Larry Fitzgerald as a roommate. I also got to sit in on production meetings. And by that, like I'm a broadcaster now, 18 years, I've called games all across the country. When I was 19, 20 years old, I met Bob Davey. I met Kirk Herbstreit. I met Bo Garrett, Michael Fountain. You don't know those names, but they're producers of games at the time, or the producer of College Game Day at the time. And I started to just make relationships with these people. And they would allow me to come to meetings. And I would begin to learn this is a job. hold on, you're not a lawyer, a teacher, a doctor, an insurance salesman. Like, this is your job. You're a broadcaster. Oh my God, you're a producer. You're on sports all the time. And then I started leaning into it, obviously. Well, over the course of the last now 25, 26 years, since I met them to now, none of those people that I met back in my college playing days have ever hired me for a job. But I have a deep relationship with all of them, from Reese Davis to Kirk Herbstreit. These are the names that people may know, but also those producers. I've stayed connected with them. I wasn't seeking, can this guy hook me up for a job? Like, they obviously knew that. I was an aspiring, competitive entrepreneur, if you will, at the time, just trying to find his way. Everybody knows that, but it was more about breaking bread at Pasta J's in downtown Oakland and Pittsburgh. All right, Mama D's, prior to a basketball game with Bo Garrett, who's now a producer at Fox, ironically, where I worked the last couple of years. So I just say that of like, if you front load that thought, if I'm going to go build some relationships, life can be really fulfilling. And I have found that when I talk to teams now, I do a lot of works with college football teams in their locker rooms. I often say, like, whatever you want to achieve, you are now literally a DM away. And you could have 3 virtual coffees with 3 people that you want to build a relationship with, versus looking at it like, who can hook me up? We're in such a transient world, especially in the world of college football, what I live every day. So I think that was a foundation early on for me. Why and how, I don't know. That's just kind of where I leaned, of like, let me just get to know you. I think it's probably a natural curiosity of trying to ask questions and wonder why. But I'm really glad I have, because I think that's why those people who have now risen to crazy stardom will still text me back or say what's up before the Rose Bowl, because we got a 20-year relationship, not a kid trying to find a hookup or a job or an internship. And I think that approach has helped me in all areas of my life.
That's so cool. And I know that you can look back on all your experiences and all the relationships that you formed and say, if it wasn't for relationship building, those relationships wouldn't exist today. And you speak about the substance of those relationships, how substantial those connections are, because they're your friends and they're people who you can confide in, people you can look up to, people you can get advice from. And we have similar experiences from the standpoint of when I was the ABC ESPN studio production assistant in Bristol, Connecticut. So in 2011, I was Reese Davis's production assistant, Lou Holtz's production assistant, Mark May's production assistant, Jesse Palmer. I worked with Robert Flores, Robert Smith, Wendy Nix, Todd McShay, all of those people. And I got to work with wonderful producers like Rob Lemley and Mike Diesenhoff and Stephen Oling. And I had the opportunity to work with Barry Sachs. He passed away in recent years. And, Howie Schwab, another gentleman who passed away from Stump to Schwab. Everybody knows Howie Schwab, and was a good friend of his. And I look at those experiences, and, when I came in as a production assistant, there was 10, including me. So 10 altogether. And out of the 10, they chose me with my background, having a journalism degree from the Huston School of Journalism and Media at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, that they felt that, he would be the right person to be in a high profile situation, but with a lot of expectations, a lot of seriousness surrounding that role or what that role entailed, because I had to be the right hand person to so many people, making sure that I was getting them the information they needed. Another way of calling that position a shot sheet coordinator. And people used to joke and say it's a glorified position, but it wasn't. They don't know how much time and energy and focus that took, because for 13 Saturdays in a 2011 college football season, working 13-hour days and having to edit highlights during the week for Sports Center and Baseball Tonight and college football, college basketball specialty shows. And they didn't know how much energy that took, because whether it was Jesse or Reese or Lou or Mark and Todd or Wendy, they all wanted their information disseminated in a different way. They all had their own processes, how they approached their highlights. And Jesse would take copious notes. You'd look at his notebook, and he wrote in very small handwriting and either blue ink or black ink. And, almost like looking at what an NFL coach has in terms of looking their play calling manual, and all the things are color coded, all the plays are color coded. Well, that's how Jesse was, being a former New York Giants quarterback and quarterback at the University of Florida. So, Jesse and I still keep in touch. And I obviously over the years, I've kept in touch with Coach Holtz. I know he recently entered hospice, but he and I have stayed in touch because he lives in the Orlando area. But there's so many people I've had on my podcast, like John Anderson and Jay Harris. And I've had Linda Cohn, and I mentioned Nancy Lieberman, and I even met Bo Jackson a few years ago, and he might be coming on my podcast later this year. I just spoke with his executive assistant. But I look at all the athletes I've met, but I have met them from the standpoint of just being at the right place at the right time. And I played up until my senior year of high school, became a fan after that. But once you meet Michael Jordan, everyone else, you're not awestruck anymore. They're people like you and me. But it's the relationships that I've cultivated. And that's what inspired me to answer your question again of relationship building, because it's the essence of humanity. But these individuals who have been a part of very successful teams and who have done tremendous things in their life and have not only mastered their sport, but the communities, the cities that they played for, and how they've impacted in any which way you can look at it. And I feel that there are two types of connections, what you can see, in 3D, but also what you feel and the emotion of connecting with these people and stepping in their world and interviewing them on my podcast and even getting to know them as people like Tim Kurkjian or Del Harris, the longtime LA Lakers, Houston Rockets, Milwaukee Bucks coach who coached Magic Johnson, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal. He's been on my podcast. And I look at these people and they say, wow, these are people like you and me, but they've achieved at such a high level. And to have them on my podcast, that in itself is relationship building, but they teach you so much words of wisdom and they impart that knowledge on you. And that's what you and I are doing. And that's what you're doing for my podcast, to tell me your words of wisdom, your experiences, how you've impacted others, and how your career has been defined by your relationships. And I'm glad that we have the sports connection in common. So I'm so happy for you to be on my podcast today.
Anytime. It's a cool community to be a part of, and the essence that you have is one that I think is important and one that's getting lost. I co-teach at UCLA with Valerie Kondos Field, who those who follow gymnastics know that she is the John Wooden of gymnastics. She's an amazing coach. She won multiple national titles. John Wooden was her greatest mentor. Now she's a professor within their graduate program titled Transformational Coaching and Leadership. Anyway, we gave all the students in the class a quiz. And prior to giving them the quiz, I asked them what they thought about AI. We started talking about it. And then I started relating it to quarterback play. And I have this working theory that in life, we're losing a little bit of the struggle, right? Me too. How do you make an apple pie? Boop. AI, give me the ingredients. Hey, my kid has a sore throat and an ear infection. Boop. Like we're just losing the struggle of just navigating, right? Well, now imagine being an athlete or just being a learner. I think of our 10-year-old. Right now, he's got to read a book. He's got to comprehend the book and write a book report. Amazing. In freshman year in high school, it might be, can you give me the 6 bullet points based on what this book is about? Boom. And there he goes. And you lose some of the mental struggle. It's why math is so critical for decision making. Well, I compare it to quarterback play, and immediately you start thinking about, like, I get to the line of scrimmage. How stressed am I? Am I able to navigate and think deeply about what the defense is doing, how the offense can overlay within the defensive scheme? Do I have mastery and true understanding? Have I navigated that struggle? Like, start hearing the word processing. You'll hear it a million times from now until the NFL draft. Fernando Mendoza, elite processor. Ty Simpson, elite processor. I'm talking about 2 quarterbacks for your audience if they don't know college football that'll be drafted number 1 and maybe in the first round with Ty. I say all that because I think we are losing a step in the next generation of quarterbacks and athletes. I wrote a book called 5-Star QB. You'd love it. It's 600 pages of research about the greatest quarterbacks in the history of recruiting rankings and why only one of them ever won a Super Bowl. Most of them never lived up to other people's expectations. They rarely had a relationship with those people who were setting those expectations. There was some sort of transient connection, right? I'm covering you, I'm evaluating you, whatever it may be. I say all that of like, to say I'm not concerned about how young athletes or young children are building relationships would be a dramatic understatement. We've all seen what we do with our finger if we were trying to date. We swipe, we don't talk. We don't ask questions, we just try to make statements. We don't necessarily listen like our life depends on it. We're just trying to navigate this real world of a relationship when we're losing a lot of foundational properties to that. And I'm concerned about that. And so much so that I've got this working theory that I referenced that I can relate to football and quarterbacks, but also I see with my kids. And they don't have AI. They don't have a laptop right now. They'll get one, right? Like they will live in that world in a matter of years. So I think what you're doing and what I'm trying to do with young quarterbacks that I mentor, I do a camp called the Elite 11, which is the most premier quarterback camp in the history of the position. And we try to front load those skills. How are you walking into a facility? I love the teams are huddling. How are you looking around the huddle? Because you now have to call a play. You don't just say a word and everybody knows what to do. So the word that your podcast is founded upon has tremendous depth to it, dating back centuries to Greek mythology and history, but also has a future that's a little cloudy. And I think it's important to keep building out tools so people can teach them to the next generation. So I love again, as I referenced, the essence of what you're about.
I really appreciate the kind words and everything that you're saying. And it's true, everything is at our fingertips. It's easy access through AI and just Googling on our phones. And yeah, you lose that wonder, you lose that struggle, or you lose that sense of direction of figuring it out on your own. And in sports, there is no roadmap. And you can say that about any profession. You can say that about anybody from any walk of life who has to figure out their journey, who has to, learn by example from others. And then they have to eventually lead by example themselves. And it takes a village, it takes a global village. And the mentors that you have in your life are so critical for so many different aspects of growing into a full, complete person who can make really informed decisions. And having a journalism degree from UNC Chapel Hill, it matters to me of being informed. Like my family and I, we watch the news every day, and we look at all different media outlets and from all different perspectives. And you want to be informed about anything, about everything. And I know that there are people out there who are afraid to be informed, or who are timid, or not really wanting to go through any stress of knowing. But for me, the way I look at it is I would be more stressed if I didn't know certain things, or if I was feeling that I was in the dark and I was the last one to know. So being a journalist by profession, as a podcast host, and someone who's been interviewed on cable network, local digital platforms, talking about a lot of different topics from finance to the economy to public policy, but going back into this platform of hosting my own podcast, it allows me to cover topics from sports, media, business, politics, and now just interviewed my first person from Hollywood, a Hollywood actress, Rhoda Griffiths, who based in Atlanta, but she's been featured in We Are Marshall and The Blind Side and all these other major motion pictures. And she has given me a lot of perspectives on working with directors. I just interviewed Trent Cooper, 8-time Emmy Award winning director, who just directed the Raise the Flags, a documentary about 50 years of Buccaneers football. And that's a topic we love because Trent and I grew up in Florida and we're lifelong Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans. But I have an appreciation of where you are in Southern California because I have family in Pasadena, love California, love the sports culture. Interviewed Mark Gottfried, who won a national championship in 1995 with Jim Herrick being his assistant, the 1995 national championship. And then he coached for 6 years at NC State later in his career. But because I was a UNC graduate, he's coaching against Coach Roy Williams and Coach K, two Hall of Fame basketball coaches. So it's amazing how the 6 degrees of separation and the overlapping, and you can look at different time periods of your life, how it's all intertwined. So that's what I love about this podcast and interviewing people like yourself.
Cool, man. I love it.
What do you feel is what you look at your career today and hope to accomplish, and what you look to as an audience and make sure that, hey, I'm going to prepare and have all my preparation in place because you're going to be taking on a new assignment with NBC Sports? How excited are you to be delving in that world and to be attracting new audience members with your next assignment with NBC?
It's a fun question. For me as a child, I can remember every weekend turning on NBC and watching the NBA, which is ironic they bring the NBA back. And it was Marv Albert and Mike Fratello and the late great Bill Walton. Like I could see the Open with Bob Costas and then watching Notre Dame games. I mean, this is the era I'm talking about, like the late 80s, right? There weren't a lot of games on TV, like Notre Dame every weekend when there was a home game that was on. And that was, I grew up in Pennsylvania, that was primetime viewing. And I think once I got into TV, like that's always been kind of a goal. Like you looked over on my vision board, like that was there. but I also loved where my feet were. I've worked at ESPN and Fox and most recently Big Ten Network, and I'll still do stuff with Big Ten Network. I love all the people that I've met along the way. And I think as I've gone through this career, I think early on, you're trying to map it out almost. Like if I go here to here to here, then boom, I'm on Good Morning America. Or here to here to here, and I'm on College Game Day. Or here to here, whatever it might be. And over the last decade, I've let that thought go of predicting, having a vision, doing imagery, meditating on it, meeting people, of course, building relationships. Yeah, that's never going to stop. But I don't think I ever obsessed over being at one place. In fact, if you looked at the bottom of my broadcast boards, and every broadcaster has them, they're all different styles and shapes and ways that you get to them. But ultimately, you get a big old piece of cardboard that you're in the booth with that's got a bunch of names and numbers on it and a bunch of notes. Well, at the bottom of mine, for 18 seasons now in the booth, it has said the same thing, which is celebrate the game and coach the viewer. And it's the last two things I look at prior to every single broadcast. So last year I did 3 games on big NBC, network television. It's awesome. And there was an excitement there for sure. There was a different feeling than I've had before, just because you kind of achieve a dream. And then you knock out the Open, and it's like every other game, right? You can't sit there and think, okay, it's Thanksgiving weekend, and I'm calling #1 Indiana in a rivalry game against Purdue, and it's Friday night, and 15 million people are watching. Like you don't even go there. Or the week before, instead of Saturday Night Live, I had UCLA Washington at the Rose Bowl. You can't go there because you're taken away from what the job is. The job is to build a relationship with the viewer, with the fan, as I referenced, like celebrate this beautiful game and coach the viewer. And I think those two tools, those two sentences are really powerful for me, because we are in an era of broadcast where you can easily make it about you, right? Whether it's your social media, whether it's your experience in the booth, whether it's your catchphrase. And I have hopefully never done that. I have really committed to the idea of like, my job is to celebrate the game and coach the viewer. Okay, why did I get there? One is, use your reference, you watch the news with your family in a variety of different platforms. Well, on all of them, it's kind of the same thing in terms of like, what's going wrong in the world. And I think that's like the same thing at school drop-off or at the playground. The first statement out of someone's mouth in a conversation isn't always what's great or what's going well. It's, can you believe? Oh my God, I don't understand. It could be minuscule, it could be global. We're obviously in a wild time in the world right now. To that point, I've always thought like, I get to stand at the 50. Like there's only 2 people that have headsets on and a microphone every Saturday at the specific game I'm at. And I'm dubbed the expert. How cool is that? How cool is that? So I'm going to celebrate the game. You drop a pass, I can't wait to watch Garrett line up again, because they're going to go back to him on the next drive. Like, that's my mentality. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He's got to make that play. I know he can. I've watched him make this play countless times on film. Uncharacteristic drop. Can't wait to see what he does on the next drive. I love that part. I'm going to celebrate this beautiful game because you're tuning in because you love your team. And I used to coach. I did 4 years at USC under Pete Carroll, who's going to be an NFL Hall of Fame coach. I wrote his book, Win Forever. I co-wrote it with him. That killed it. Like I love to coach, and I left coaching because I still love the beach and I love living in Southern California. I didn't want to move all around the world, and I didn't want to live that life. But in my warped mind, Garrett, I now every Saturday don't just coach 4 quarterbacks or coach 55 players on offense or 105 on a team. I'm coaching a couple million, and I love that part of it. So that's how I walk into the booth every Saturday, and that's how I walk into preparation on Sunday night when I'm getting ready for the upcoming game. So being an NBC is a lifelong dream that I'm really proud to achieve, and I love the fact that I get to be there and be around those people, and it's going to change my life in a bunch of really powerful ways. Also, it's because of the people that I'm with and the people that I've been with. And I don't know if I would have said that 15 years ago if I had this job early. So I got a different respect for early fame, early success. It's hard. It's hard to navigate that when you don't have life experience. And I'm only 44, so it's not like I'm on the back 9, but I'm right in the middle. And I feel like I'm in a sweet spot, and I'm really proud of the people that I get to work with every day and call friends and colleagues. And, we're going to go try to kill it again this coming season and for many seasons to come.
That's awesome. And I was going to ask you about your experience coaching under Pete Carroll at the University of Southern California. What a privilege, what an honor. And what advice did you learn from Coach Carroll that you've carried forward to this day? And never say never, right? I mean, do you see yourself one day in the future coaching, or because of everything you've just said of how much you love celebrating the game and coaching the viewer and having the opportunity every game that you have a headset on and you are narrating what's going on the field, all 4 quarters. I'm sure it's very rewarding. It's very emotional in the sense of you knew what it was like to be a coach, you knew what it was like to be a player, and now you're taking all of that emotion and you're taking all of that knowledge and your expertise and you're trying to, really get people so enamored or so passionate about what you're seeing on the field. So I'd love to know those thoughts.
That's a cool question. Number one, I'm coaching right now. Okay. I got a 5-year-old basketball team. I'm the head coach of, okay. We are leading the league in high fives and fist bumps. So getting my coaching chops in for sure. I coach our older kid in flag and I coach quarterbacks in the summer. Like I'm coaching, I think that the essence of that, I think to your question of like coaching, like making 10 million a year and you're a coach of the Big Ten or the SEC or the ACC, my alma mater, Pitt Panthers. Yeah. I've always had a dream to do that. I don't know when or how that may or may not happen. I've always loved watching models like Trent Dilfer or Steve Kerr, or people kind of came from the booth or the front office, or just a different path to becoming a head coach. I also know how challenging it is. I'm also part of the European League of Football, which I don't know if you knew about that league heading into this call, but I'm like a minority owner in the Paris Musketeers. So maybe I'll get my Ted Lasso in and coach the Musketeers once my kids get to college. Who knows? Because football is a global sport. When I think about Coach Carroll, I started smiling. I just talked to him the other day. The things I've learned from him, we don't have enough time. The depth and breadth to his approach and his philosophy are ones that embody my life every day. You talked about meeting Michael Jordan, when you were 17. So I met Pete when I was 19. And we went to dinner at a place called the Chart House in Redondo Beach. I could see it like yesterday. We're next to each other and I'm eating a salad and, we're just having this conversation. And he goes, "What do you want to do in your life?" I'm still playing at Pitt. His oldest son, Brennan, is my best friend, was the best man at my wedding. So I've known the Carroll family for a long time. And he looks at me and he asks that question, "What do you want to do in your life?" And I say, "I just want to impact the world in a really cool way." I don't know why I said it, Garrett, it just came out. And he looked at me dead in the eye and he goes, "Okay, then don't worry about the competition. Don't try to climb the ladder of success rung by rung. Wherever you go, whatever you do, go create value." And that landed on me of like, go create value. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, as a wide receiver, that means know every position. In fact, know the quarterback reads, know the right tackle reads, know the defense inside and out. So like they have to play you. They have to play you because they trust you so much. Okay, playing career. Coaching, you create value that when someone else offers you a job, the place that you're at counters and keeps you. Or another place keeps offering you a job and a better job. Like you're creating value. You're not worried about the next gig. My first job at USC was stapling practice scripts. You love this. I wrote this article in the Huffington Post 15 years ago about the power of stapling a practice script. Because in my mind, I am the best stapler of practice scripts in the history of the planet. Because every day I did 17 of them and it was a perfect upper left and I stapled them and handed them out. And Pete's whole thing was you're either competing or you're not. Like you're either creating value or you're not. You're in a relentless pursuit of a competitive edge or you're not. And it became, one could argue, like a sickness. I'd say more of a way of life. And it's a really cool way to look in the mirror. Like, yeah, am I like competing? It's the old test you could do with young athletes of like, okay, run down and back. I'm going to time you on this sprint in the basketball gym, 90 feet. Let's see how quickly you go. Is that the fastest you went? They all nod their head and they say, okay, I'm going to give $10 to anybody who runs faster. They all run faster. And the point is that you always got a little bit more in the tank. And I think for Pete, what he taught me that I probably still hang on to most is the simple phrase of always compete. We titled his book Win Forever. And the whole theory was if you want to win forever and have sustained success, no matter what you do, you're always going to compete. And that has always been a part of me as a husband, as a father, as a youth basketball coach or a broadcaster.
That's so cool, Yogi. That's awesome. Because as a father myself and a husband, my wife and I, we just celebrated 5 years of marriage. And as I was mentioning, I have a 3-year-old son. He's approaching 3.5. And my wife, we're due for our second child being born in a few weeks. My wife is well into her third trimester. But, my son, I can already tell, we play baseball in the backyard or, he loves basketball. He's going to be a very tall kid. So can't wait to get him involved in sports very early. And hopefully my daughter will love sports too, but it's so true. Coach Carroll's words, the relationship you have with Coach Carroll is truly remarkable. That's so special. And thank you for sharing it with my audience and me. I just interviewed Drew Bledsoe a couple of days ago, and obviously we know his story very well. And for my audience at home who don't know his story as well, being a 1993 first round, first overall pick, right? Coming out of Washington State. And just before losing his starting job to Tom Brady, signing a 10-year, $103 million contract. And that hit that he got from the New York Jets defensive player and land him in the hospital and didn't know he was going to survive. And Trent Cooper, I had just interviewed, is really good friends with a doctor who operated on Drew Bledsoe, and I'm going to connect the two of them. It's interesting because a lot of people, and I was sharing this with Drew, I said, Drew, you're a hero. You really are a hero. You're a survivor. Your story is remarkable. It's worth emulating because there are so many people in your position, Drew, who wouldn't know what their second act was going to be, wouldn't know how to handle that adversity, losing your starting job because of a medical issue, not so much of a performance issue. And although that Tom won 7 Super Bowls out of 10, and Tom's the greatest quarterback of all time, but if you look at Drew's career in the 90s, breaking a lot of different records, and the fact that Drew now in his second career, if you will, is a successful businessman, him and his co-founder, Josh McDaniels, not the one with the Patriots currently, a different Josh, but very successful running Bledsoe Wine Estates and their winery called Doubleback, and what Drew has been able to accomplish in his second act and being a wine connoisseur and a businessman and having 64, 65 employees, as he said, and being in that position and feeling that, yes, football is what he did, but it didn't define him in the rest of his career, that he was able to handle that adversity and he was able to put things into perspective. And you could still feel and see the pain on his face. I mean, he saw over my left shoulder a picture of Tom and Tom Brady, and he's like, yeah, I remember that guy. They're good friends, obviously, but he's like, I guess I taught Tommy too well, Drew said. I taught him so well that he took over the starting job. But if you look at Drew's career, I mean, it was Drew mentoring him. It was him mentoring Tom, and that is a part of Tom's success. And so you can look at every individual, whether it's in sports, business, media, politics, in Hollywood, you, me, whomever, and along the way, we have faced adversity and we have competed in so many different ways, and we feel that was our best good enough. And we can't have fear that somebody might outcompete us. We can't have fear that an opportunity that we hope or desire to have might not come, because it's whatever God puts in front of us. It's whatever we have the opportunity. We can control what we can control. We got to live with what we can't control. So I look at my own experiences and going from an intern on Capitol Hill for a US congressman to working at ESPN, NBC, being a board of director for the Chamber of Commerce in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then going into financial world for over 8 years in a father and son business, and then transitioning out into full podcast mode. But I look at my experiences and I say, well, I'm proud that I got through it all. I'm humbled by that too, and having the support of my wife and my kids and my parents and just extended family, her parents, her extended family. I feel that we're all survivors in a way, and we just have to just put one foot in front of the other and fight for another day and make sure that what we do on earth every day, we're impacting somebody else's life in addition to our own. And I look to the words of Coach Lou Holtz, who is 89 years old in hospice, but what a life he's lived. A national champion head coach from the University of Notre Dame. And he said to me in his book, he says, Garrett, it's nice to work with you at ESPN. Every day someone does something great, make that someone be you. And I've always lived by those words every day. Let that be you who makes an impact on someone else's life. And that's the essence of relationship building. And that was fitting that he was my first guest on my podcast. And I'll always think fondly of Coach Lou Holtz and, every guest who has come on my podcast. And having you on my podcast means a lot because it's a part of this journey as a podcast host, and talking about a topic that matters to me the most is relationship building, because everything in life is relationship building and all the people in our lives. If we master relationship building, then we master life and all the challenges and all the obstacles and all the triumphs that come with it.
Well, that's what you remember, right? Like, I mean, I love Dr. Lou. I used to stay up to like 4 a.m. just to watch that segment after a game. And Mark May was a Pitt guy. So then those two and Reese Davis, it was like must-see TV for me back in the day. But I talk to my colleague, Ashley Adamson, about this all the time. She'd be a great guest for you on the show as well. She's a master in relationship building. And we went through, if you think about like the arc of, let's just say the last handful of years, I was part of the Pac-12 when it fell apart. 100-plus-year-old league and everybody's working for a common goal. And by the end, there was only a couple of us left standing, and then it just ended. And you kind of had to pick up the pieces. And we were so lucky. We both landed at Big Ten Network, which is like a godsend. I mean, talk about an amazing conference. Way more importantly, amazing leadership. I mean, as good of a leadership as I've ever seen in a corporate environment in my life. Truly, I mean, elite. And now, like, we'll see where we pivot to the next phases of our careers. But every time we talk about life as broadcasters, she's a host and a reporter and a broadcaster, we talk about, hey, what game do you remember? There's a handful of games I remember. I remember coaching in USC, Texas, obviously. I remember coaching in USC, Penn State in the Rose Bowl in '09. That was the last game I was on the sideline for in that role. And then as a broadcaster, maybe 5-10 games, max. Stanford, Notre Dame was the final game of the Pac-12 Network, of course. I remember that game. My first Big Ten Network game, I'll never forget that. Minnesota upsetting USC and the fans rushing the field. I remember that. Wisconsin, Washington last year in the snow. First NBC game, I remember that. But my point is that 18 years at an average of 12 games a year, we're talking about like 200 games. But I'll tell you what, I remember every producer, director, technical director, intern, times after the game when you're sitting in the hotel lobby reflecting on something, the 5 a.m. drives to the airport where you get to talk about somebody's life way outside of their responsibility in the production truck. That's what you remember. I mean, whoever's listening, think of any world that you operate in. Do you remember the day-to-day? Do you remember the last 10 emails you sent? Hell no. But you remember how people made you feel. And as a storyteller and a filmmaker and an author and a podcaster, my show's Why Option, like I always believe that there's like a couple cornerstones to a great story. One, it starts with great characters. Okay, we have that every episode. You have that every episode. Number two, they got to go on a journey, that there's an arc. There's got to be stakes. And then there's a result or a resolution. Do you win or lose the game, right? Sports are the easiest one. You got characters, you got teammates, you've got a journey, which is a season, you've got stakes, which is games, winning and losing, and then you got a resolution, like how'd you do? But most importantly, the number one trait that makes a great story great is, did you make someone feel something? And I just had this conversation with Coach Carroll a couple days ago of like, he had so much success because his players could feel him, right? So can people feel you in your show? Like, can an audience member watching me call a game, can they feel the passion that our crew shows? Because we're so connected. Camera angles, storylines, graphics, whatever. Same thing in interpersonal communication relationships. Like, can people feel you? Or do they see right through? Because I'm looking over your shoulder the whole time, because I'm looking for something transient the whole time. And I just think the more I do it, like the less I'll remember the games. Like, I bet if you asked Mike Tirico and Chris Collinsworth, who just called the Super Bowl, what do you remember about that game? Over the next couple months, those memories are going to fade, and it's going to be like hanging out with the producer post game, cheers and a beer afterwards, like we did it. Hop on a plane, go right to the Olympics. Like, it's the people, it's the relationships, man. So the more and more you're in it, the less memories you really recall of specific moments, and the more people you recall. And that's a beautiful thing.
That's awesome. I love the way that you just gave my audience and me your perspectives on what we all feel and what we all put importance to is how people make you feel. You won't remember the things that maybe they said 5, 10, 20 years ago, even let alone weeks ago or months ago, right? But it's a continuum of life. So it's always going to be in the rearview mirror. You just have the present and the future, and we can't even get back 5 or 10 seconds ago. So in all of these experiences, it's how someone made you feel. It's how someone made you look inside yourself and say, what can I do? Is there more to do in this world to impact others? And the relationship that you have with all these different individuals who allow you to confide in them. And I love being around people who have intellectual curiosity about subjects that I can learn from, that I can glean from. And they feel the same way when they talk to me, and they look at the world differently, or they look at it and they analyze it. And I tend to overanalyze, but I find that to be a strength to a measured degree because it allows me to learn so much about the world around me. And it's not so much about what you read or not so much about what you hear from others, but those things matter, of course, too. But just keep asking more questions so you can have that insight to help you make more informed decisions about how you want to live your life, how you want to raise your family, how you want to have the strongest marriage possible or strongest relationship with your kids and your community. So I appreciate that. final few questions before we depart from our interview. What sporting events are you excited about the most to cover with NBC Sports? Tell me a little bit about your family and how much they mean to you and how much they have meant in your journey and goals for the future. And then the final question will be final words of wisdom for my audience and me about relationship building that means so much to you that will carry over to my audience after we depart from this interview.
Regarding NBC Sports, it's everything to do with college football. I'm so excited to get to campus, spring football, training camp, get on site with our crew, our producer, director, like the whole thing. I can't wait. I mean, I'm wearing out our team already, and Paul Burmeister is going to be my partner. He's calling basketball games, calling the Olympics, and I'm sending him articles in the middle of the night. So I just can't wait. I don't really care the game because I want to the point of like, I have such regard, I think, for players, haven't been one. Like every game is the biggest game you got because it's the only one you got. So I try to approach all of them. I think being on NBC is going to be cool because the games are going to be elevated a little bit. So you're going to go to Iowa, you're going to go to Indiana, you're going to go to SC, like all the things that I've done in the past and doing in the Big Ten, because that's where NBC has their majority of their games, Big Ten and Notre Dame. Every weekend you're getting a banger. So I can't wait, man. Just roll it out and let's roll. I'd do 2 a week if we could. I think my family has been the core of me. I met my wife on a plane randomly. I sat next to her and it took a few minutes, but I finally got her to talk to me. And then when she did, it was a wrap, at least for me. She's what I call my heartmate. And our philosophy on life is if you bring the sacred into the everyday, then the everyday can become sacred. So we don't have all the bells and whistles that maybe one might want in their life, best cars or the biggest houses, but we don't give a damn. Like we have each other. And that is so much more than enough. And when it's with someone you're so connected to, it's powerful. Our 2 sons are 10 and 5, and they're awesome. They're full of life, full of juice, full of energy, full of sport and play and dirt and mud. And like the dirtier their hands are when they come home and their faces and their clothes are, the better. So we've got a family that embodies a phrase called free fun. I wrote a children's book called Finding Free Fun a couple years ago with our oldest son. It's the pandemic. He was struggling to learn how to read. And I said, let's just write a book together. And away we went. And it's this idea of like, you can find free fun everywhere. You just got to be willing to look for it. And you got to be connected to the moment. So that's kind of who we are. And then I think I'd leave you with this. And I learned this as a young broadcaster, and I hope to apply it to my life. The only job in relationships is to listen like your life depends on it. And that's it. Like I feel that as a broadcaster every Saturday in the booth, listening, of course, to my partner, what he says, but I'm listening to nonverbal communication on the field. I'm listening to the wind. I'm taking a headset off and listening to the crowd, listening to my producer, listening to body language. I'm just listening like my life depends on it. And that's cool because number one, it just connects you to the present moment. And that's all we really have. And I think in this world of this phone or these alerts, things popping all the time, let alone like how our brains are trained. I mean, you see it as your kids get older. Like it's almost like the world is trained to not be connected to the moment because there's so many things to be connected to. Walk into your local airport. How many people are this versus this? Like it's just life. We travel around the globe every summer, and that's what the world is. So if you can listen like your life depends on it, that probably means you're asking questions.
And I love that you talk about listening like your life depends on it because you share the same words of wisdom. That was my final question to future Hall of Fame, 2-time World Series champion, 3-time MLB Manager of the Year, Joe Madden, who's talked about how the importance of listening. Listening is so critical for success. And I love that you share the same words of wisdom as Joe. But I want to thank you, Yogi, for being with me today and speaking about relationship building, a subject matter that matters so much to you, just like it matters to me. And, I met my wife at a grocery store. Publix is the main grocery store in Florida. You can find Publixes on every corner in Florida. And I met my wife at the 10 items or less checkout line. And it was funny because I had 32 items in my shopping cart. I even kept a receipt that I still have today of when I met her. And I was looking to get into her line and she's like, I don't think you qualify, but I'll let you through. And then we just started talking and I asked her for coffee and she said yes. It was a funny story years later, but the fact that you met your wife on a plane is pretty cool. And the fact that within a few minutes you found your soulmate. And that is the greatest thing for people, for spouses to find your best friend. And I'm so glad you met yours and have yours and I have mine. But I want to thank you again for being my 105th guest on the WaveCapital's guest speaker series on relationship building in a team environment. Yogi Roth, NBC Sports broadcaster this fall, podcaster, book author. Thank you so much again for your time. I really, really appreciate it. I look forward to staying in touch.
You got it, man. Hey, congrats on life. Good luck with the next baby, and I'm sure we'll stay in touch. Appreciate having me.
You take care, Yogi. Have a wonderful rest of your day. God bless.